करणार असतो तो. English poet means he belongs to Britain, or he belongs to British, or he is a British poet. Then he is known for his poem Angel in the House. So this is his favorite poem, or this is his popular poem. What is the title of this poem? Angel in the House. So this poem is very popular by Coventry Patmore. His father, means Coventry Patmore's father, encouraged him to publish his first book. And the title of that book is Poems, and it was published 1844. So his father encouraged him to publish his first book. The title of this book is Poems, and it was published in 1844. He also wrote essays on art, including the collection Principles in Art. So he wrote essays, and his collection of essays, Principles in Art, is very popular, and it was published in 1889. So this is the brief introduction of the poem of the poet, that is about a father and son. So the poem is about the relationship between father and son. What it is. So what happened in the poem? The poem begins with the father punishes the boy or his son for disobeying him and sends him to his room. The father punishes the boy for disobeying him and sends the boy to his room. The father feels remorse for his actions, considering the fact that the mother is no more. The father feels remorse. Remorse means guilty for his actions, considering the fact that the mother is no more. He goes to check in, and he finds that the child is sleeping on the bed with his eyes wet from having cried. So finally, the father went into the bed to see whether the child is slept or not, but the child was slept. The father sees that the child had arranged some toys in neat and clean manner. And when he goes to the bedroom of the child, he finds that the child has arranged some toys in neat and clean manner. The father then hopes for God's forgiveness. The father then hopes for God's forgiveness. So this poem shows that how we commit our mistakes and how we repent on these mistakes. What the poem is about, now we will discuss the poem line by line. So I just read these lines of the poem and you can hear these lines. My little son, who looked from thoughtful eyes and moved and spoke in a quiet grown-up voice, having my law the seventh time disobeyed, I struck him and dismissed with hard words and unkissed. His mother, who was patient, being dead, then fearing lest his grief should hinder sleep, I visited his bed, but found him slumbering deep, with darkened eyelids and their lashes yet from his late sobbing wet. And I, with moan, kissing away his tears, left others of my own. For on a table drawn beside his head, he had put within his reach a box of counters and red veined stone. So this is one part of the poem where it says, my little son, my little son, my little child, my little son, who looked from the thoughtful eyes. How do he look? He looked thoughtful eyes. Means what? Mature, grown up eyes. And having the spoke in a quite grown up voice means he's speaking quite grown up voice, but having my law the 7 times disobeyed. The son disobeyed how many times? 7th time. In 6th time, the poet ignore the child or the son, but he again and again disobeying. Disobeying अवज्ञा करणे किंवा आज्ञा न पाळणे. I struck him, I beat him and dismissed. कवीला राग आला आणि त्याने त्याला मारलं आणि त्याला त्याच्या रूम मध्ये हाकलून दिलं. With hard words and unkissed. त्याला मोठ्याने जोराने हार्ड वर्ड्स मीन्स जोराने बोलून त्याच्याशी प्रेमाने न वागता त्याला रूम मध्ये पाठवून दिलं. His mother, who was a patient, being dead. त्या मुलाची आई आजारी असल्या कारणानं मरण पावली होती. Then, fearing lest his grief should hinder sleep, the poet was thinking, what will be the son is doing in his bed? कवीला चिंता वाटू लागली की आता तो रूम मध्ये जाऊन काय करत असेल. नक्कीच तो काय करत असेल. ग्रीफ, GRIEF, ग्रीफ म्हणजे काय रे? दुःख. नक्कीच तो रूम मध्ये जाऊन दुःख करत असेल आणि दुःख करत करत झोपला असेल. I visited his bed, and that's why the poet went into the bed of the son, but found him slumbering deep. And when he went into the bed, the son was slumbering deep. Slumbering deep means शांतपणे झोपला होता. With darkened eyelids and their lashes yet. परंतु त्याच्या भोवया काय झाल्या होत्या? डार्कन झाल्या होत्या आणि त्याच्या भोवयाच्या पापण्या तिथं ओल्या होत्या. From his late sobbing wet. Sobbing wet means sobbing म्हणजे हुंदके देत देत रडणे. हुंदके देऊन तो रडत होता आणि त्याच्यामुळे त्याचे डोळे कसे होते? वेट होते. WET, वेट means ओले. And I with moan. I with moan. मोन म्हणजे काय रे? दुःख व्यक्त करणे. कवीने दुःख व्यक्त केलं. Kissing away his tears. And the tears of the son kissed by the father. Left others of my own. आणि ज्यावेळी कवीला वाईट वाटलं आणि त्या मुलाचे जे अश्रू होते त्या अश्रूंचे किस करायला लागला तो, त्यावेळी त्याच्या डोळ्यामधूनच काय झाले? टीयर्स खाली आले आणि ते कोणाच्या गालावर पडले? मुलाच्या गालावर पडले. For on the table drawn beside his head, he had put within his reach a box of counters and red went stone. And the near of that son there was a table, and that table was very neat and clean. शेजारीच त्या मुलाच्या काय होता? टेबल होता आणि त्या टेबलावरची खेळणी कशी ठेवली होती? अतिशय व्यवस्थित टापटीपणे केली होती. Means it shows that the boy or the son is sincere. The boy or son is good. But the poet angry on that boy and the boy become a very disappointed. Then what happens? A piece of a glass abroad by a beach and 6 or 7 shells, a bottle with bluebells and 2 French copper coins ranged there with careful art. So these are the toys. A piece of a glass, काचेचा तुकडा, and 6 or 7 shells, घासेचा तुकडा, bluebells, bottle जे आहेत ते, French copper coins, all these toys were arranged there with careful art. हे सगळी जी खेळणी आहेत ही अतिशय व्यवस्थितपणे कोणी ठेवली होती? कवीने ठेवली होती. टू कम्फर्ट हिज सॅड हार्ट. आणि त्याच्याबरोबर त्याला काय वाटलं होतं? बरं वाटलं होतं. कुणाला? मुलाला पण आणि आता कवीला पण. So when that night I prayed and the poet became very unhappy he was repenting, पश्चाताप करणे. And काय पश्चाताप केला? So when that night I prayed, he prayed to whom? He prayed to God. तिने देवाला प्रार्थना केली. I wept and said, कवी रडला आणि म्हटला देवाला, काय म्हटला? Oh, when at last will I with tranced breath. मला माफ कर, कारण काय मी चूक केली, असं कवी त्या ठिकाणी देवाला प्रार्थना करू लागला. Not vexing thee in death, and thou remembers of what toys we made our joys. The poet says that not vexing thee in death means there is a death, and we people do not look joy in small things like toys. कवीने प्रार्थना केली देवाला, काय प्रार्थना केली? की आपण उगीच जीवनामध्ये एकमेकावर रागवतो किंवा चुका करतो आणि आपण जीवनाचा आनंद घेत नाही. जीवनाचा आनंद अतिशय छोट्या छोट्या गोष्टीमध्ये, म्हणजे कशा रे? टॉईज म्हणजे खेळण्यामध्ये सुद्धा असू शकतो, हे आपल्याला समजत नाही. वी मेड अवर जॉईज, आपण आपला आनंद बनवू शकतो. हाऊ वीकली अंडरस्टूड, वीकली म्हणजे अतिशय कमी लोकांना हे समजतं. Thy great commanded good, then fatherly not less than I, whom thou hast molded from the clay. Thou leave thy earth and say, I will be sorry for their childishness. And the poet asks sorry for the God. Why? Because he threatened his son, he angry on his son, and that's why he made sorry for the God, and he says that God should poem. So the poem The Toys is one of the most beautiful poems written by Coventry Patmore. This poem is a beautiful poem. And how it is beautiful, let's discuss. He associates his poems with the everyday happenings of life and has deep concern for religion. So what is the subjects of the poets? Everyday happenings. So the story discussed in the poem, the story of the son and father, is the everyday happening, and the father's deep concern for religion. The father is concerned about the religion. The poem, The Toys, is high religious. So this poem is also religious. Means what? The poet addresses to the God and asks for forgiveness to the God. The poem relates the story of a father and son. Yeah, we have discussed that the poem is about the father and son. The father treats his son harshly, but later realizes his mistake and asks God to forgive him for his foolish behavior. So father treats his son very harshly, but later realizes that his mistake and asks for God to forgive. Why? Because he has behaved very foolishly. So this is what we can. So here we can understand that what happens next. Uh, Child's disobedience. Child's disobedience means what? Disobedience, I have talked to you. Disobedience means आज्ञा न पाळणे. Obedience म्हणजे आज्ञा पाळणे. Disobedience means आज्ञा न पाळणे. What was the disobedience of a child? Let's discuss. The poet tells us how he punished his son for disobedience. So in the poem, we have discussed that the poet tells how he punished his son for disobedience. The child acted and talked just like a grown-up man. So in the poem, we have seen that the child is very sincere. He was acting like a very grown-up man. He is talking like a grown-up man, means he seems to be mature. Then what happens? He made a noise. The child was making a noise, and his father asked him to keep quiet. But the son did not obey him. The child was making the noise. His father asked him to keep quiet, but the son did not obey him. And then at seventh time, in 6 times, the father ignored the child. But at seventh time, the father punished his son and sent him away without the usual kisses. So, seventh time, the father punished his son and sent him away without the usual kisses. The child was much grieved. The child was much grieved. He left his father and went to bed. So he left his father and went to bed for what? For sleeping. It's about the relationship between father and son. So what happens next? Let's see. Then father's regret. Regret means what? Pashyatap. After some time, the father realized that he had made a mistake as his son was lonely since his mother had died. Just now I told you that the mother of the son or the mother of the child was died. And that's why the father become very unhappy, or he uh, feels guilty, and he realized that he had committed a mistake. He feared that the child might not be able to sleep due to his grief. The father thought that the child must be crying in the bed, and that's why he went inside the bed to see what his son is doing. He went to his bedside, but he found the child asleep. When he entered into the bed of the son, he found that the child was sleeping, but his eyelids were swollen due to weeping. His eyelids were swollen due to weeping. His eyelashes were still wet with the drops of tears. The eyelashes of the son still wet with the drops of, we can say, tears. So the poem describes father's regretness, regret the toys. What happens about the toys? The father became more emotional when he found that his son had very neatly arranged some pieces of a glass, a red bean stone, some shells, and bottle of blue bill, and two French copper coins on the table. The father became very emotional when he found that his son had very neatly arranged some pieces of glass, a red vein stone, some shells of and bottles of blue bills, and French copper coins on the table. So he became very emotional. It was touching scene for the father whose wife was dead and there was no one to console the child. He felt sorry for his attitude. The father bent over the child and kissed away the tears from the boy's cheeks, but tears from his own eyes dropped on his son's face. So, this is the emotional scene we can find in the poem. So, what is the emotion in the poem? The twice. So, God is merciful. So, God is merciful. In this poem, poet points out that God is always kind and merciful to man, but man often fails to follow the commands of his creator. So, the God is merciful, and we should be follow the commands. So, this is the theme of the poem. He provides, he means God. God provides man with all the simple joy of life, yet there are some who do not fear God even on their deathbed. So God provides us a joy, but we should not, uh, we do not enjoy the joy, we should enjoy it. God knows that though we had been disobeying his commands and enjoying ourselves with worldly things, yet he forgives us. So though we disobey the God, God forgives us. So here the child disobey his father, the father should forgive the son. And the last conclusion, we can find that the father hopes that as he has forgiven his son, God would pardon him for his childish. He prayed all night with the feeling that God is merciful and he would forgive him. So, what is the moral in the poem? The moral in the poem is there is a proverb. What is the proverb? To err is human, to forgive is divine. We should forgive the mistakes of people and live friendly with. So this is the poem, The Toys. So if you have any queries